Hello everyone, my name is Aimee Smith. I'm a full-time voice actor based in Sydney, Australia. I've done a little bit of everything, so I've done national commercials, I've done video games, animation, audiobooks, but I'd say that the bulk majority of my work is in video games. I've done hundreds of them. I've been in games like Smite, Mobile Legends, Dislyte, Freedom Planet, Dark Deception, and a ton of other things, all here from my home studio. So a little about me. I don't want to bore you all in particular if you already kind of know my backstory. So I'm just going to be a little bit broad with it. So I started voice acting purely as a hobby back in October 2011. I was 18 years old there's a mention, but I don't think that's for me, so I'm going to ignore that. So October 2011, I was 18. Before that, I basically only did like drama electives. I had done some amateur musical theatre and shows and things like that, and I was an extra on a TV show that never came out, and I decisively hated that, which is good because I always loved acting. But it was never, I want to be an actor for a range of reasons. It was very much mentally driven in that from Australia, who on earth turns out to be an actor or voice actor living here? But I'd never actually thought about voice acting before. It was a Google search because I tried theatre, tried screen, and I came across voice. And I thought, oh, wow, that's really weird. And kind of everything I loved about acting clicked in this form. I loved video games ever since I was a kid, animations, like, the typical beginning story. Everyone loves all of these fun mediums. But yeah, I came across the Voice Acting Club and the Voice Acting Alliance at the time and had done a range of Steam games and mobile games. And Freedom Planet's kind of the one that started it all. So for about 5 years, I never called myself a voice actor. I was always like, I am a teacher who does voice acting, and I'd kind of always refer to it as this verb. I was never a noun voice actor because that seemed ridiculous to me. Even though I'd done paid work, even though I'd done commercial games, I couldn't do it. It just seemed ridiculous to me. Until the sequel for Freedom Planet 2, they were in pre-production, and Sabrina had asked me to go over to the US and record it in studio at the Okratron 5000. And I said no, because it was ridiculous. I was a teacher, I'm not a voice actor, blah, blah, blah. And she said, like, look, no, like, can we make it happen? So I ended up saying yes, went over, and I just remember pacing in my hotel room every single day, being like, I am an idiot. Like, why am I not giving this a crack? And I knew the reasons. The reasons were I didn't know a single voice actor still residing in Australia who did this as their job. So I don't think I can articulate, and for a lot of you, if you are internationally remote voice actors, you can probably understand this feeling of, if you don't know anyone still residing in the country living the life you want to live, you feel like it's not possible. Like, what on earth is going to make you be different? How are you going to be the exception to the rule? So it was really, really tricky. So I said I was going to be broad. This isn't broad. I apologize. But basically, so from 2016, went back home. And I had a plan for 3 years. I was still going to be teaching. I was a full-time teacher. I went to part-time, and I was very, very aware of, okay, where is my work coming from? How much am I earning? How do I attain repeat clientele? And I really, really broke it down, and I tried to make what is a very subjective career into an objective one to ensure that this would be sustainable for me. So in 2019, I decided to go full time, and I'll be honest, I had a dollar amount in mind, wrote it down, tracked my income every week, every month, what was billed, what came in. And I said, if I can meet this number, which was here in Australia, we have the tax-free threshold. It's a particular number, and basically anything under that still kind of classified as a hobby. You don't have to, it's not really classified as income. So I kind of said it was roughly that amount. And I said, if I get over that, then awesome, I'm going to do another year of this. And I almost doubled it. And I thought to myself, okay, cool, there's something there. And if this is just the beginning and now I can do this full time, it can grow. And then I've been doing it now. This is my 5th year full time, which is crazy. Awesome. So for today, let's get into the meat and potatoes. I'd like to talk a little bit about the benefits to being an internationally remote voice actor, the difficulties, and the considerations and tips that I'd like to pass on. I want to make this a really balanced approach. I'm not going to say it's all fun and games and roses. It's really hard, but it's also incredibly rewarding. So I want to ensure I'm giving a balanced perspective. What is really cool about this is I think what contributed to this being so difficult for me when I started out is that all the advice was so one size fits all. And I just remember always reading things that were so catered to the US experience. And I'm like, this isn't applicable to me. This isn't how agents work here. This isn't the opportunities that's prevalent in my local market. And it was really, really tricky for me because I was like, where is the international perspective? And that's what contributes to the mentality of I can't do this. So that's what's really cool about doing stuff like this, because I'm hoping to kind of break that. And I think in more recent years, there's a lot more internationally remote voice actors thinking, you know what, this is possible, which is really exciting. Okay, so I'm going to start with the benefits in breaking the one size fits all. Every internationally remote voice actor is going to be different. Your home country is going to be very different by way of, you know, dubbing opportunities. Like if you have your own language within your country, if you have lots of local work, or your agents are really amazing. So I'm not going to paint kind of an overarching international experience. I'm going to try and segment it in accordance to some countries where I can, where I have the knowledge. Particularly here in Australia, our market is very tiny. We obviously don't have our own language. We speak English. And when you do watch a lot of media, it is generally, you know, it's American or it's British. The Australian experience kind of gets lost. Our accents, it's really weird. We speak English, but we're not really prevalent in media. So it means we don't have a lot of local work here, and our agency opportunities are not very prevalent in the character space. So we're in a bit of a unique space. And some countries are going to be the same, where you find that you can't really rely on local work or agency work because the sustainability isn't quite there. But as a benefit, I want you to kind of see this as it is incredibly empowering to think global in your career from the get-go. If you don't have the work in your own backyard, which I know that like a lot of marketers in voice acting talk about, they're like, oh yeah, start in your backyard and then move on. If you kind of don't have enough there, just start thinking global from the get-go. So my philosophy, my approach is lots of eggs, lots of baskets. And if you think that, it's really kind of empowering to think how much work you can attain of your own accord. Another benefit, flexibility and the ability to work from home, obviously. Almost all of my work is from home. There's only a few opportunities in which I get to go out in studios, but it is really, really cool to do so much of it here. Another consideration, projects over in the US sometimes, actually oftentimes, pay more than their home countries. If I can give a bit of an example from the Australian perspective, and then I'll give another country's perspective, the GVAA standards for audiobooks are $225 USD per raw hour. But here in Australia, the gold standard, so I worked with Penguin Random House, and that's like the standard here. The rates were 250 AUD. In USD terms, it's 178 USD per raw hour. So that's almost $50 USD less per raw hour. So like, even when you think about that, it's quite tricky. But as a benefit, due to the more comprehensive rate cards in the US, it means that any studio that I'm working with outside of my own country, I'll aim to apply US standards because they're the most comprehensive rate cards. So here in Australia, we don't have video game rates. So I will always apply GVAA standards to any video game that I'm working on. But it does mean that with audiobooks, when I get opportunities through my Australian agent, if it's not Penguin, it's generally quite a lot less. So I generally do audiobooks through production companies in other countries, and I will apply that US standard, which is really cool. On the flip side of that, I mean, I've heard over in Germany, I believe the audiobook rate is higher, but it's just a consideration where if there's an area that you're working in, you don't always have to apply your home country rates. Apply the US or even like UK equity where you can. It's really handy. Okay, and obviously barely needs mentioning, but just to be a little bit enlightening, opportunities are expanding for international talents, which is really exciting. Before the pandemic, it was possible to do this full time if you were located outside of the US or Canada, but it was harder. It definitely was. There are definitely more studios taking on internationally remote voice actors and more agencies, which is a really, really exciting time. Okay, the difficulties, because I promised I would give a balanced approach. The difficulties, I'm going to start with the LA agent. And it's not to say that this is impossible, but it is really tricky. As an example, A3 artists, they list their talents' home bases. This is one of the things that I'll often check out when I am kind of looking for new agencies. I have a look at the talent that they've already got on their books, and they'll often list where they're geographically based. So A3 artists, they list their talents' home bases as the UK, London, Toronto. Atlas has Canada, and I believe I've seen some UK voice talent on their books. And CESD has Suling from Malaysia quite recently, which is really, really groundbreaking and exciting. So it's not to say that these home bases are always going to be the case. It would be great to see some more countries more normalized and having voice talent from those countries more readily accepted onto those rosters, because as we know, everyone says like the LA agent, like that's where all the opportunities are in a lot of cases. Linking into that, some studios either don't hire internationals or will hire on an exceptions basis. So that's what's really tricky. We can't say that, oh yes, this studio never hires internationals, but it might be more exceptions based. It might be, okay, there's a particular role that we're trying to fill and we need to look outside of our network. So we're in an interesting transitional time where it'll be cool to see if in a year's time, in 2 years' time, more if the casting calls, the auditions that are sent out to rosters are sent to everybody, which would be really, really cool. So for example, like last week, I emailed an awesome studio and they got back to me and I got really excited because I'm like, yay, now they've turned into a warm lead. Like they might like my work. Awesome. But unfortunately, the email that came back said that they only hire voice talent based in the US and a SAG-AFTRA as well. But this mindset isn't only like found with some studios in the US, it's also quite prominent in the Canadian market too, because they have quite a thriving community over there. And so I noticed for a while before the pandemic, I was cold emailing quite a lot of US studios and I kind of getting some of the same responses back. So I was like, okay, I'm going to pivot because like Canada has a wonderful market, but I did notice a lot of that coming through as well, where it's like, oh, you need to be located in Canada. And obviously post-pandemic, some of those have changed, some of them have stayed the same. That can feel really disempowering. That can be really, really sad, but it's just a matter of get back on the horse and keep going because there are lots of studios that do. You need to keep in mind sometimes being internationally remote can also additionally put you in that too hard basket. But the industry is getting better inch by inch, and I'd like to think that we've seen that particularly over the last year. To kind of pivot a little bit, because I think that this is one of the things that would often be mentioned as a one-size-fits-all. You're likely to have seen those things on TikTok where they're like, yes, if you want to be an audiobook narrator, you just have to join ACX and you'll make tons of money. Wrong on so many accounts, obviously, as we know. But for one of those things that I kind of want to touch on is people often don't mention the fact that ACX is unavailable to a huge amount of countries. So when you hear things like that, where it's like, oh yeah, just join ACX and like, yeah, it's fine. There you go, get audiobook opportunities. It's actually only open to individuals residing in the US, the UK, Canada, and Ireland. So we just have to keep in mind not every piece of voice acting advice that you receive on Twitter or on social media is going to apply to you. There are some structural barriers in place that do stop us from getting the same opportunities if you are in one of those outside countries. So it's just about being considerate and actually understanding what the market is like. But I'll mention a little bit more. If you are interested in audiobooks, mention that a little bit further down. Another difficulty, quite obvious, being socially deprived. Because we all live in countries or states where we kind of think, oh yeah, I don't know who else is around here. I feel completely alone. I really encourage you to find your community. It makes a huge difference when it comes to recommending peers and being recommended, when it comes to just having a chat about, oh, what do you think I should charge for this? Or how is this agency for you? Or it's really important. And regardless of where you live, you will find somebody. I often hear like, oh yes, I'm based in, even here in Australia, Canberra. And we were like, oh, actually, like there are quite a few people who live in Canberra and are doing voice acting. So like definitely connect and find those people. It makes a huge difference. Because of the aforementioned in this little difficulties section, sometimes huge projects can feel and be out of reach for the time being. We're never saying never, we're never saying always. However, and this is kind of where I try to differentiate it when I talk to fellow voice actors, if your focus is on, I want to be in huge projects, change that right now. Like, that would be a wonderful byproduct. But if you want to be a full-time working voice actor, you can 100% do this. If that's your focus, if you love the craft, if this is what you want to do, this is 100% possible. It's hard, but yeah, I just want to be really cautious whenever I talk to people and I hear kind of the things that they want to be in. That's great. I'm not saying it'll never happen. It might happen. Put it in the wish list. But if your focus is, I want this to be my job, that is so possible. So I hope that that's empowering. Okay, and now some considerations and tips. The first thing I'm going to mention is tax implications. Many tax treaties exist between the US and a range of other countries. These countries sign the W8 BEN instead of the W9. Often when you work with studios, sometimes they'll send you the W9. I need to be very clear. Do not say to them, like, actually, I need a W8. Just get the W8, keep one pre-filled in... you might actually have like an invoices folder or whatever you have, contracts folder. Just keep one pre-filled and redate it and just send it off and just say, oh, hi, just a note, I am based outside of the US, because they don't always need to know that you're based outside of the US. Like, don't make it harder for you than it needs to be. But keep it pre-filled and just say, yeah, just a note, I'm based outside of the US, so I have to sign the W8. I've attached it. Thank you so much. Just send it to them. Done. Where was I up to? Basically, all that does, it establishes that you're not a US person, so you're exempt from paying tax to the US. But yeah, if your country is not listed, I'm afraid, I'm not too sure, and you do need to seek tax advice, but I'm just going to copy and paste it. Let's see if it works. I should have been reading the chat. I just realized. I'm very sorry. Okay, cool. So I've just pasted... Oh, why did it not go all hyperlinked? I'm sorry. I think there's a gap between there now. Oh, thank you. It said that link is not allowed, and I just saw that deleted. But if you wanted to have a look, basically, if your country is listed, it means that there's a tax treaty that exists between you and... Thank you, Kat. That's wonderful. But if your country is not listed, I'm not too sure. That's past my expertise, but I just wanted to send that just in case you weren't sure and you haven't been in that situation just yet, because not all studios will ask for the W9 or the W8. It's just if they happen to ask for one, just send them the W8. Okay, when it comes to payments for international clients, obviously the most easy one is going to be PayPal. Yes, the fees are quite high. You can make them tax deductible in I'm not going to say all countries because I don't know all countries, but the vast majority of countries, I believe. But yeah, the fees are high. If that's not something you do, if you kind of just track your gross income and you don't want to kind of bother with all of that, you can also open a Wise account. You can open a range of different bank accounts from different countries in there. So it means if you're working with a US studio that asks for ACH details, so your automated clearinghouse, you can give them your US bank details that exist within the Wise account. It's a very small fee to open a bank account, and not all clients want to go through it. Some are just going to ask for PayPal, and so 100%, like, I'm not saying get rid of your PayPal account. I'm just saying definitely maximize the amount of payment options that you have, because it makes it easier depending on who the client is that you're working with. Like, sometimes I'll do direct deposit just with my Australian clients. Sometimes I loop them into my agent and then my agent pays me. But for international payments, I really recommend PayPal and do the Wise account and open bank accounts based on where your clients are who are open to paying you that way. I really recommend that. And yeah, the fees are quite good too. Another consideration, I'm going to with everybody, I'm not there, but I do really recommend from a business to business perspective that I feel that this is a really awesome way to attain relationships and clients. So if you're looking at the video game sphere, like you're looking at cold contacting indie game developers and game localization studios. If you're big on LinkedIn, for game localization studios, the person that you're generally looking for is the project manager. So it's sometimes a different term from, like, obviously if you're doing indie game developers, you're looking for game developer. So the job title is different there. If you're looking at audiobook work, contacting publishing houses, or just in Google, post-production audiobooks, and see if you can find a directory or a list to start contacting from. It doesn't have to be clinical. It doesn't have to be copy and paste. Like, I really recommend scaffolds, but I don't recommend just copy pasting and sending to everyone. There has to be an element of being personal, something that you like about their work. I also believe that for you to effectively do this, you yourself have to be marketable. So make sure you have your demos, you have the website. If you're contacting a specific medium, like, really pinpoint the work that you've done in that medium and highlight that within your emails. And really be aware that it's not just one cold email and you're expecting this plant to grow. Like, sometimes it takes a follow-up, a second follow-up. So really be aware of that. It's actually one of the reasons I make visual demos every single year, because that's a perfect, like, oh, hi, just wanted to follow up as it's been a while since I last touched base. Super quick one. Here's my recent visual video game demo and visual anime demo, right? It doesn't have to be super big, but that's one of the reasons why I make visual demos all the time. Okie dokie. Boom. The second thing is upskilling. If I'm very, very honest, I personally cannot make a full-time living on my native accent. Many of my other colleagues here can't, even despite being with top agents. The top agents here in Australia are very different to the top agents in other countries. There are not as many audition opportunities. Like, if I get one every, oh gosh, if I get 2 a week, like, that's a good week. So it's completely different, but you do hear some voice actors with agents getting multiple auditions every day, and that's not the reality, depending on what country, like who your home agent is. But yeah, so I can't make a full-time living in my native accent. I have a sustainable business because so much of my work is American and British. It has to be. I would love to use my native accent more, but it's just not prominent enough in media. Our commercials, even if you do national commercials here in Australia, it pays very differently to other countries too. It's a lot less because we're a smaller market size. So for some internationals, pending your home country's infrastructure, and I mentioned that earlier, it's all going to be different. You may need to upskill into one of those accents, but it completely depends on how much media your country is producing. One other consideration for time zones. So I've learned this the hard way multiple times. So I just believe that this is a good way to provide a good service. If you have a client reach out to you and say, hi, I would really love to know your availabilities, as our end client would like to book you for something, offer your availabilities in their local time zone. Do not, even when they ask you for your local time, don't do it. Like, do it as do it as a slash if you want to, but have theirs in bold first and then offer yours if you'd like to on the end of those availabilities, but always send it to them in theirs. Just be as easy as possible to work with. You don't constantly need to remind them that you're in a different country. And also, clients often get it wrong, particularly for studios that don't always work with internationally remote voice actors. But especially when there's a day's difference between you and the country that you're working with, it's just easier to give them their time zones. Bit of a funny story, actually. So obviously I'm in Australia. There was an audiobook company who was based in, I think it ended up being, I can't remember, but basically outside the US. But it was funny because I put my availability in LA time, thinking that they were in LA, and they were giving their times in LA time, but neither of us were actually in LA. We just did it to be easier on the other person. And you're going to find that happens a lot. But yeah, just try and be as easy as possible. As a bit of a footnote, because I am at the end of my little spiel, perfectly on time. I do offer coaching for internationally remote voice actors who are in smaller hub countries who are specifically looking at developing their video game opportunities. So I'm going to just drop one other link in the chat, only if you're interested. Over here. Perfect. Okay, cool. That link is not allowed. But yeah, it's something I've opened up at the end of last year just because I've worked with a lot of coaches and done a lot of classes, and I was just very aware that the international experience often was not referenced, or people kind of didn't know how to work with it. So I was like, okay, that's fine. Like I'd like to think I know my shit to a degree. So I was like, I'm going to open something up so that there are consultations and I can help develop that, because I think we're finally in that kind of market, which, you know, there's a space for us, which is really exciting. So it's very small. I have very few availabilities. I'm not turning it into a hugely commercial venture, because it's not about that. It's simply about being a resource and helping those people that fit within those specific means, if you're keen. Which opens us up to the question and a portion. I'm going to see if I can call people up. I don't know if it's a raise hand thing, but I don't know. But if you can do that, awesome. And then I'll see if I can invite you up. I think I saw the flicker of something. Or I can just answer the chat as well. It means I need to backdate and read a little bit. There's waiting music. It's just hard. There's not a lot of information about it. So I wasn't even going to talk about the SAG-AFTRA stuff because I don't know enough. I've done one SAG-AFTRA project, but we did a couple of years ago. But I mean, I wasn't Taft Art lead. I didn't go through any of those means. So I just do not. Yeah, and every time I've been asked if I'm ZAG, I've then been ghosted. So I don't have the experience. If there are hands being raised. Oh, hello. Okay. How do I invite? Oh, no. Baby, I need help. Oh, wait, invite to speak. I figured it out. Oh, no. Invite to speak again.
Hi.
Oh,
Hi.
I think we made it in the end. Yes, it is. Sorry. I think what was happening was I was inviting you up at the same time that Phoebe was inviting you up, and so you kept getting kicked out.
So much love that I was getting kicked out of the room. I see how it is.
That happens.
Okay, so
how are you going?
Very well, thank you. It's 2 in the morning for me. 2:30.
Oh wow!
Anyway,
Aw, I really appreciate you showing up then.
I appreciate being here. Actually, I've got a lot of information just from this, and actually, the fact that it's 2:30 in the morning should clue maybe into the fact that I'm not U.S. based. I'm a French voice actor, beginning voice actor,
Oh, nice.
getting into that. And I had actually a couple of
Oh,
questions for
that's
you. First thing,
absolutely go for
you
it.
you mentioned the question of accents, which is something I'm really interested in because, well, uh, I don't know what my accent sounds like at the moment, but it's definitely been a big consideration for me for the training I've done, the work I've done online. Just being really upfront about this is not a generic accent that I'm going to be able to present to you. And
Mm-hmm.
would you recommend leaning into that sort of thing, just having that unique flavor, or trying to um, either expand also into having something more generic? I don't know if that's the correct word. So
Yeah,
those are
no
sort of the
worries.
two options I'm considering.
Yeah, great. So, when I mention upskilling, it's definitely not eliminating what you already have. So, when we provide multiple takes for auditions in particular, I find that it's a really, really great tool belt option where you kind of have a feeling, all right, look, they're probably going to go with a standard American accent. Even though they say open to all accents, you do find a lot of the time it still does default that way. So, often what I'll do is I'll kind of give them in the first take what I think they want. And then in my second take, when I feel it's appropriate, when I feel it could be a really good fit, I'll then put in my native Australian accent. And, sometimes it's worked out, sometimes it hasn't. But Yeah, I mean, sometimes you're not going to know unless you give it a crack. So nobody's saying get rid of it. But yeah, in terms of business sustainability, unfortunately, a lot of it in global media is still American or it's British. They're still mainly the default ones. So yeah, I would still really recommend upskilling in those as well. But I definitely think that they would be used for your native accent too. I mean, as I mentioned, a lot of the casting calls are skewing now towards open to any accent where it's applicable.
Okay. And if that's fine, I don't know if I can double dip. But I did also have a second question. Just um,
Hmm.
this one should be quick to ask. Is just for breaking into an American market from working abroad. Do you think it makes more sense to start looking for work online, like on castingcall.club and websites like that, or to try to find local work in your country if there's enough of a community, enough demands to support it, and then from that going to America, showing this is what I've done in my country?
I mean, look, I think that there are some really interesting, diverse roadmaps that are prevalent into breaking into this field. Something that I like to recommend is that there are so many opportunities publicly accessible right now. So we talk about Casting Call Club, we talk about the Voice Acting Club website and their Discord. Um, and there's also at VA Casting RT on Twitter. We're very fortunate in that a lot of these things really didn't exist like when I had started. We had Voice Acting Club and we had Voice Acting Alliance. But that was kind of it. Like we didn't have at that time, console games available and really cool animation series. Like it was all like little Steam games, little mobile games. So there's actually a lot of opportunities out there in the publicly accessible domain. Kind of when you're in that beginning phase, what I recommend is really kind of plowing it out in that space for a while, seeing where your booking types land. Because as I mentioned before, it is a very subjective field, but there are things that we can do to make it objective. So when you're getting cast for things, really putting down, okay, interesting. I thought my vocal type was this, but I'm actually getting booked for these kind of archetypes, which kind of indicates that those are the sorts of things that should be on your professional demo as well, right? If you're already booking them, then you should be happily displaying and highlighting them in your demo. And then when you do book enough work kind of in that publicly accessible stage, then you have your visual demo and then you already have a marketable portfolio because you've been booked in all of these things. And that would be a part of your cold emailing and roster submission phase because you've already done the hard work. You've already been booking against sometimes what is dozens or hundreds of people for some particular casting calls. And that's kind of the roadmap I recommend because I think that a lot of people want to skip to the like, oh, I want to be on this studio roster because like that's where all the opportunities are. But I mean, if you're kind of not booking in that publicly accessible state, like it doesn't get easier as it goes on. It gets harder because it just means you're in these private pools and there's really talented, really experienced people in those pools. So we really try and take our time more than we can feel disheartened. But that's kind of what I recommend, like going to all of these websites, and really seeing what lands back to you and then using that to attain the next stage of opportunities. It's not to say it's the right roadmap, it's not to say it's the only roadmap, but that's just my personal recommendation.
All right, thank you very much.
No problem at all. Thanks for asking your questions.
I just click leave the stage.
I think so. I'm not sure. And Kat. All right, invite to speak. First up, how you going, Kat?
Hi.
Hi.
Hey. First of all, hi, and we're in Dislyte together, and I'm a big fan of yours.
Oh, thanks
Um,
so much.
yeah. Sorry, I'm nervous, but I'm also I'm really happy that we get to talk. And I
Oh,
was
don't be nervous.
wondering, um, what's your workshop like? I wanted to take it, and I was just wondering, like, what are some things that you go over in your workshop?
Oh, in the coaching or workshop? I
Mhm.
do a few workshops around. I only do kind of local in Australia, so I do them in Sydney and Melbourne. And
Okay.
I kind of just do a generic, like how to become a voice actor. That's an intro one. And then more recently, last year, I was like, okay, cool. We have more voice actors in Australia now. Now I can open up something intermediate, which is booking multiple roles in video games. So instead of kind of the introductory standpoint, we're more talking about technique and craft and business and those kinds of things. But when it comes to the coaching specifically, I offer career consultations, which is basically a time purely for you, so we can unpack rates, we can unpack business, so where it could be a matter of like if you're just beginning where to find opportunities, it could be a matter of like, okay, I've made an audio demo, now what? Or breaking down cold emailing because I have scaffolds from ones that I've used in the past that have worked out, so I'm happy to share all of that and break down what would work for you based on your own portfolio, or developing SMART goals and really breaking down the steps to success. Basically those kind of things. The time has to be for you, so I can't create the predominant
sure.
scaffold. But yeah, basically I have like a range of boxes in my Calendly, and it's basically asking how would you like to utilize this 30-minute or 1 hour time slot, and then based on that it could even be like demo unpacking or website or whatever. And ahead of time, so before our session, I'll basically go through all of those things and I'll write down all of those notes and we can discuss it all during the session. So it's definitely not like, let's spend
General
10 minutes.
tool. Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah, I would
it's not like, oh, you're going into the coaching session and being like, okay, cool. So you tell me for 10 minutes what you'd like to learn, because that's a waste of time. I like to kind of just give you everything from that first minute and we unpack it all together and ensure that I've reflected on everything that you'd like to go through, or if there's any follow-up questions, which is generally are.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And your time.
No
Thank you
worries,
for
all,
coming
Kat.
to the Voice Acting Guild.
No worries. I'm glad that I get to unpack some of this. It's always good fun.
Thank you.
Awesome. Have a good one. Alrighty. Were there any other questions? I'll have a little glance over the chat. More hands can be raised. Yes, they can be. Oh, hello. All right. Invite to speak, Roddy.
Hello.
Hello, hello. How are you?
Good, good. I am on the East Coast. I've started for like 2 years, but I haven't really got anything, so I still consider myself a rookie. When you say, I forgot, there was a part when you were talking about sending out emails or so. Would you recommend,
Mm-hmm.
like, have you ever tried sending them out to like companies in France or Germany or that part of Europe? Like not just US?
Yeah, Oh, absolutely. No, it's quite funny actually, because there is such a focus on the LA market. I actually don't work with a lot of LA studios. I have clients in Singapore, Germany, Korea, Ukraine. Like honestly, and I think that's what contributes to the sustainable nature. A lot of my, as I mentioned earlier, video games is a lot of my work. There are game localization studios all around the world. So you need to think if there might be a game localization studio based in France, and they not only want to localize their games into French, but sometimes into English as well. So it works both ways. So I'm not a French voice, but if they ever need if they ever need work localized into English, I might be the person that they contact. So yeah, that's where I really recommend not being too hyper fixated on the country, really, like I mentioned at the beginning, really being aware that opportunities are everywhere. One of my favorite clients is actually in Germany, and I've worked on about half a dozen games with them. So yeah, so really, really being aware of things like that. Basically, anyone that localizes their games into English is generally going to need English voice, and they can be found everywhere.
Got you. Well, yeah, that was the only question I had. Thank you for uh, thank you for having me on.
Yeah, no problem at all. No worries at all. Thanks so much, Reddy.
No problem. Let's see.
Emails don't cost money. Yeah, that's exactly it. Oh, what were the sites I mentioned besides Casting Call Club? So the Voice Acting Club Discord, they have paid and unpaid casting calls there. I'll put in at VA Casting RT on Twitter. There's also there's honestly lots of places, even Newgrounds. I love it because whenever I mention Newgrounds, there's generally people that are like, oh yeah, I forgot about that place. I am not a snob. I look for opportunities everywhere. Because things are always going to get quiet and you don't want to be sitting there waiting for the phone or waiting for that email. You are actively searching for more opportunities, which means that you are cold emailing or you're following up or you're looking at those publicly accessible sites. But yeah, honestly, I could go on forever and ever. If you're into audiobooks and you're outside of the US, Ahab, just type in Ahab audiobooks. You can make a free profile on there. It's very annoying that you're not notified whenever auditions are on there, but just check back every week and they generally have some opportunities listed on there. Find Away Voices lets on internationals. But honestly, there are so many opportunities out there. I really, really recommend trying to find directories, because when you're actually, particularly for audiobooks too, when you're cold emailing, a lot of the time they'll be like, oh, here is our narrator application form, and you only get that link when you cold email. So really, I know it can be scary, but really be aware that not everything is outwardly findable. Lots of things are, but for other specific opportunities, you have to go digitally knocking on those doors. Yeah, lots of studios have voice talent rosters and they're available for submissions at all times. For example, Sound Cadence is one of them, but there's tons. But some of them don't have openly seeable rosters, but they have internal databases that you have to go knocking for. So yeah, it's very important. Let's have a look if there are any hands. Oh, we are all very shy, aren't we? I'd like to think I'm quite friendly and approachable. I really thought there'd be more questions. That's so interesting. Oh, I'm not able to turn my microphone on right now, but I just wanted to ask, how do you balance both doing voice acting and also having a life outside of voice acting? Ooh. Yeah, look, I think that that's something I still struggle with sometimes. My biggest work-life balance thing is that I don't work weekends. And then I'm going to kind of explain the caveat to that. I don't record weekends. Unless they pay a rush fee, generally. Because that's my sacred time where I do basically anything else that is not work. However, I guest at conventions sometimes, so that is my weekends. But everything else, so whether it's recording, whether it's my coaching, or whether it's teaching workshops, I'll do it all during the week, and I'm quite conscious of doing all of that. But I do still, if a convention comes up, obviously I have to do that on the weekend. And I will still send emails, not cold emails, but just responding to emails. I have to be contactable on a weekend. But other than that, I don't turn my microphone on. So it's one of the biggest things. And have friends that aren't voice actors. I saw Jason Lord's tweet the other day, which basically talked about how important it is to just have friends that aren't in the field at all. My best friend does not play video games. She didn't even know what Animal Crossing was. Like that's kind of the realm that I'm talking about. Does not play video games, which is like my first love. Does not watch anime. She thinks it's stupid. Like, does not watch cartoons unless it's for her baby. And it is just the most grounding thing to be friends with someone where, even though for me sometimes that feels like my everything, to her it's nothing. And that can be a really refreshing thing to talk to somebody and be like, hey, look, you can survive without these things. Yeah, and we talk about trash TV and our dogs and trips that we've taken and our uni days, and you need that. You really need that, because sometimes you're too much, particularly because this can be very socially isolating, or it can be too socially overwhelming if you're with too many voice actors. Yeah, you need those people that just talk about you as a person and remind you that you are all of these things outside of being a voice actor. So yeah, I really recommend that. how much time would you say you spend finding work versus recording auditions? It really depends on the week. I'm going to kind of go through. I'll see if I can find a week that's quite representative. Just because I was on a cruise last week, so I'm like, oop, there's like no auditions there. So I think it was the week before. I think it was about 30 auditions. Not a lot. Some people do way more than that in a week, but it was about 30. And then by way of jobs, I think it was 5. So I did like a 4-hour animation session. I did paid revisions for an audiobook. 2 little video games for a game localization studio, and then another bigger video game. And that's kind of like an average-ish kind of week, I'd say. But yeah, I mean, spent finding the work. I generally kind of outwardly find work when they're not already in my inbox, because that's the idea. Like, you're hoping to get onto internal databases so that opportunities are sent directly to you, and sometimes you are booked directly. It happens with my Australian agent where they're like, yep, Aimee, they want you to record this radio spot, and I'm like, cool, and they already picked the spot on my demo that reflects. And for other localization studios as well, they're like, yeah, we already have your work here and the end client shows this. So that's kind of the goal. You're trying to transition a lot of your opportunities into your inbox. And that's where the cold emailing comes in. But everyone goes through slow weeks. So when it is slow weeks, then you're kind of going back out into the public sphere and finding things. Let's have a look. My girlfriend doesn't watch anime. Wait, I also don't. That's good. Question, what is your recommended scheduling programs or sites for coordination with clients around the world? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, like, I use Calendly for my coaching. I just use Google Calendar when it comes to putting in sessions, and then I'm quite paper and pen still. I have a big wall calendar that I'll put like all my main sessions and anything like work related on there too. But yeah, I don't use a lot of scheduling programs or sites for coordination. In terms of relationship building, I do send off e-blasts. So my website domain is through Wix, and Wix has kind of like an inbuilt CRM. So it means that whenever I've worked with a client, and I'm quite particular with this, I want to make sure that I have I've worked with them a few times and they know me by name. It's not like a cattle call-y roster. When there's actually, when they book me directly for that kind of thing, I'll put them into my contact database through Wix, and then I'll send off e-blasts. So I will, like, I've done like a happy Halloween one, and I sent a picture with my dog in this cute little costume, and I said, hey, like, feel free to send me pictures of your pets or how you looked for Halloween. And like, I just like to touch base with things like that. That's a kind of scheduling thing I do. In terms of, I think it's like Time Zone Wizard, like, I don't use any of that. I honestly, just for speed, I'll just put into Google like, oh yeah, 9 a.m. LA time to AEDT so that I get the instant conversion. That's what I do. Yeah, sorry, I'm like thinking of your question. I can't think of anything else. I'm sure someone else will say something. I'm like, yeah, I do that too, but nothing is coming to mind. Oh, how to create a cheap booth for recording at home. I have to say, on the techie equipment side, I'm not amazing, but look, generally USB microphone, pop filter, blankets, mattresses, that kind of thing is wonderful for starting out. Just being really conscious of your environment, because you don't want the sound reverberating everywhere. See, I'm trying to think if I can find it super quickly. Sorry, if you give me like 2 seconds, I can send a link through. Basically, everything that I'm not very good at talking about, I like to defer to someone else. Okay, cool. So here's an overall resource by Jeff Basanti. I don't know if that's how it's pronounced, but it'll send you the tweet directly. reply. There we go. So that's really a wonderful breakdown. I would rather not talk. Yeah, it's not my thing. Biggest advice for beginner voice actors. Before you pile on bills and mortgages or rent or any other kind of pressure, just have fun to begin with. Embrace play, because the last thing you want to do is have your creativity be stifled by all of these other considerations in life that have nothing to do with the craft. So yeah, if you're beginning and you're too fixated on, I want to book X dream role or I want to make X amount of money, it's too much. It's going to be stifling your creativity. Like, have all of those dreams and have all of those goals, but just don't be afraid to play. If you jump from beginner to like, okay, I'm going to make this the business now, you start to panic because you're like, the auditions aren't coming in the way that I want them to, and I'm not booking the way that I want to. Just ensure that you're taking your time and really ensuring that this is what you want to do, because it's a marathon and there are so many ups and downs. So yeah, I really recommend that. We need to remember it's fun first and foremost. The nicest message to receive is, hey Mark, I have a job for you. I know, right? Yeah, well timed, buddy. Awesome. The second nicest message is send emails. Excellent. There it is. How to act in front of people and not get stage fright. Look, I think that stage fright still kind of always exists. The nerves don't go away. Or they take different forms. For example, I don't get nervous in video game sessions anymore. And I think it's just I've done too many, and I use mantras a lot. Like, I literally take a beat outside. I'm like, okay, Aimee, you know your shit. Don't get nervous. And I literally say that. Sorry if I'm not meant to swear, but I'm Australian, so you asked for it. But I do that. I have to go, you know your shit. Don't get nervous. You've done this so many other times. Like, yeah, just get rid of it, because it's okay to be a little bit nervous, because those nerves get everything pumping and the adrenaline's rushing, and sometimes it's a really nice place to be in. But even though video game sessions, I'm fine, I still get nervous in dubbing anime sessions, because I can't say the same things. I can't be like, yeah, Aimee, you know your shit, because it still feels quite new for me. So even though I've been doing this a really long time, I still get those nerves there. But in the end, yeah, exactly as Mark said, you were hired for a reason. You know your stuff, or they wouldn't have booked you. And a lot of it just does come down to experience and competency and being a professional, and, you know, being prepared without being over prepared as well. Like, making sure I don't like study the script and write notes and stuff, but I will glance over the script and I will familiarize myself with the client, and I will ensure to ask any questions up front or comment on something funny within their script, just to kind of break the ice before recording automatically. Ensuring I have my water with me, ensuring I'm ready at least 5 minutes before the session. All of those things contribute to a place of comfort without over-preparedness, so that you're still flexible within the session. But yes, I love a good mantra. How did you get into voice acting? Oh, that was the whole beginning for me. But yeah, basically I started October 2011. I was on the Voice Acting Club and Voice Acting Alliance, but I don't consider my professional journey until 2016, when I was over in the US and I came back, and that's when I was like, okay, Aimee, time to put on your professional hat. So, yeah, by those standards, I guess my journey hasn't been that long, because the whole beginning for me, I felt like, was kind of play. Swearing comes with the Aussie accent. Exactly, the whole smorgasbord of be thankful that's the only word I said. At first, when you're in your own studio, you can always redo the take, or alternatively just submit it, because you don't know if they won't like it or not. Yeah, totally. I think, yeah, it's more the live directed sessions, I think, where people get nervous. For newer talent, how do you recommend folks deal with the initial rejection of reaching out to places and getting ghosted or not needed? Look, it is hard, because there were some studios I really, like, told you the story about last week. I saw their portfolio and I was like, bloody love to work with you. So like, even if you're not new, it can still sting where you're like, damn, okay, so all of those projects that they cast for are not accessible to me. That's a bummer. But I think it's just focusing on there are thousands and thousands and thousands of opportunities out there, and sometimes it is a numbers game. And I think that's why I stress the whole, if you want to be a famous voice actor with all those huge opportunities, you might need to kind of reevaluate why you're getting into this. You have to love the craft. And if you love the craft, there will always be another opportunity available to you that will contribute towards the sustainable nature of your business. And that's the biggest focus. It really comes down to the person. If you're chasing fame and you want to live in your home country, it can be really fucking hard. And with the industry the way that it is at the moment, in some cases, not possible. But yeah, if you want to do this as your job in the character sphere, you can. And you've just got to keep contacting. Close that door and then move on to the next one. What do you think makes for a great session? I realize I haven't checked the server events. Does anybody have their hands up? Oops, there is one person. Okay, cool. I'll answer this and then I'll flick back. What makes for a great session? Ensuring that you're flexible. Mentioning all of your expectations up front. Because the last thing you want to do is, it is awkward, and I've still had to do it many times, but if they want files split, try to mention it before the session that you have an additional fee for that, and those kind of things, and really stressing that, well, this is all raw audio and I clip out all of the, ensure you do that too. Ensure that you're clipping out the conversations that you're having and the client's having, like just have the final raw audio in there. So just taking those little considerations as well. Okay, cool. I'm going to flick over. Courtney. I think I have to press it again. Invite to speak. Oop. Oh no. Okay.
I'm all good. All right.
Oh,
Howdy.
you're there. Hello.
Hello.
How are you going?
Good. Good to speak to you again.
Is indeed.
All right. So my question is, how large of a body of work do you recommend getting behind you before you start the cold emailing process?
Ooh, that's a great question. Look, it probably depends on who you're contacting as well. So if you're contacting like indie game developers, so for example, something I always recommend is, it's not called emailing, but it's called contacting. So you might be on Twitter and a game developer follows you. And the easiest thing to do, because they're not even a cold contact at that stage, it's a warm contact, right? Because they're following you. Might be a matter of you follow them back and you send them a private message and say, hey, thank you so much for following. Thought I'd return the favor. I noticed that you're developing X game, whatever it's called, and it's looking wonderful. And I noticed that you don't have any voiceover in the trailer just yet. Just thought I'd let you know I voiced in some games like blah, blah in the past, or just a few games in the past. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you need an audition. So you don't need like a huge portfolio to do something as simple as that. It's just really a basic conversation. So if you want to cold email game developers who aren't necessarily following you, but you love their work, I don't think that you need a huge portfolio for that either. It might just be you're contacting a visual novel game developer, and I think it's a great idea. You don't have to do it though, but if you've worked on some visual novels in the past, it shows that you kind of understand the voice style that they might be going for. So you may have only done one or two and said like, hey, I've loved the fact that you're developing this visual novel. I've worked on creating with this title, and those kind of things. But if you're looking at huge roster up, it might be you booking something that might widen someone's eyes, right? It might be like a global mobile game, or it might be like a Warhammer title or something that people recognize. That might be enough to get you over the line if you didn't get on those books the first time. So yeah, so overall, still saying give it a crack. If you don't hear anything, don't be scared of the follow-up, because that something else that you've just booked recently might be enough to get you on there.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Aimee.
No worries, Courtney. Alrighty, let's go back to the chat. Also consider community theatre, maybe D&D and such. Absolutely. what are some of the hardest parts of thinking about things as business when it comes to all aspects of voiceover, like costs, what you can offer people, etc.? So the hardest things about the business, I think it's the fact that it can take so much time. Like I like to think I still record a lot of work, but I still do a lot of, everything else still takes a lot of time. Like if I want to keep the cogs turning, the follow-ups and the cold emails and the invoicing and the updating your website and the looking for publicly accessible opportunities when the things aren't directly in your inbox, all of that is time. And that's really all the business part. Like anything that's kind of keeping the cogs turning is the business. Yeah, so it's just about creating systems as best you can. So for example, my invoicing software, I use QuickBooks. So it means I send that off, and I also integrate a form for if anyone wants to write testimonials. So it means that I don't have to send another email in the future if that's something I'm looking for. I have that embedded within my invoice so that if clients did like my work, they can click it and then they fill out the form and then I have a testimonial. So looking at multitasking as much as you can and making things more automated is really, really wonderful to eliminate the time aspect. Also, I will send, I use hashtags sometimes to represent my days. So it used to be like hashtag Tuesday tips when I would write like my tips for entering into the video game sphere on Instagram. So for Wednesdays, I have like Wealthy Wednesdays, just so I remember if I for some reason don't have my planner with me. So hashtag Wealthy Wednesday, that will be when I send an automated reminder to my clients through QuickBooks if I haven't been paid yet. So I might have a net 7-day period on an invoice, and then, the 9th day rolls by and it happens to be a Wednesday. I'll just go into my invoicing software and press remind, and then there's like a scaffolded message that goes by and it's like, hey, just a reminder, this has not been paid, please don't hesitate to contact me if there are any problems with having this invoice completed. So just automating all the business things as much as you can so that you're not rewriting things over and over again. Same as the emails. I mean, if you're contacting a video game localization studio, have a scaffold for that particular type of work. Audiobooks, same sort of thing. Like they should all, across all mediums, it should all look very, very different and then personalized from there. But yeah, I love a good scaffold. Yeah, you're just trying not to spend as much time as you can. What software do you use for recording? Oh no. I still use Audacity. I'm sorry, I know. I had Twisted Wave and I was like, nah. And I have Reaper that my husband actually bought for me, which is really nice. He's like, you've kept saying you need something else. And I could not get it working. I looked up the Booth Junkie video and I couldn't. So, I know, I'm sorry. And usually you do PayPal for international. Beam is Oz only. Oh, is it? How funny. I've never used Beam for a client, actually. I've only used it for friends. Yeah, I still do PayPal for international and I use Wise for some clients. Yeah. I don't use Wise for every client, but just for some that are quite open with how they pay you and they ask for how it's best to pay you, I will give them my Wise bank accounts. I tried Reaper, but I crawled back to Adobe Audition. See, I hate subscription models. So I feel like Audition would probably be the way to go. But yeah, it drives me crazy. All right, I'm going to have a flick over. Are there any hands up? No? Okie dokie. Alrighty, I might take one more question and then I have to skedaddle. So if anyone had a last question. Any advice, like pointers as to what skill should one possess? Attaining a business mindset, flexibility, great cold reading, upskilling in your accents, all of those, and being friendly. I know that's not a skill, it's a personality trait, but man, some people are assholes, so just don't be an asshole. Seriously. I know, sounds easy, but for some people I think it's really hard. So yeah, I don't know, just be nice. And I think that even when you are an internationally remote voice actor, I feel like some of that comes through the screen. Okay, I'll do one more. What do you love most about the voiceover community? I mean, like, I loved theatre, but I don't think, at least some of the people I was around, I don't think I liked the theatre community in my, yeah, I don't know. I don't think I really felt it. I love how grounded the voiceover community is to a large degree. Like here in Australia, it is really, really beautiful. I mean, like if you knew of, and we had like 50 people come to PAX, which is this big convention in Melbourne. And it was like, if somebody was kind of new to the group and hadn't met somebody else, like you introduce them and we talk about lots of things, not just voiceover. Yeah, I don't know. It's just really nice. And same sort of thing, even when I went to the US, like Dawn Bennett is the nicest person ever. And Alejandro Saab was so cool. And they were just really, really nice people. And I think it's more possible to be a person when you're a voice actor. I don't know if any of that made sense. Alrighty, awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming along and having a bit of a chat with me. I hope that some of that was helpful. But yeah, it's really good occasionally to just have a bit of a talk outside of the mold on some of the things to consider as an international, and I hope it was empowering. I really encourage you to look for opportunities everywhere. Do not feel pigeonholed into a particular location. You can work with clients from all around the world. So definitely reach out. Start with the mediums that you already have the most experience in, you know, like put your best foot forward. If you already have a video game demo and you already have a video game portfolio, then start your cold emailing journey there. Or if it's audiobooks, if you already have the audiobook demo and you've already done some audiobooks, then start it there. It's much easier to snowball than it is to start from scratch. So even though you might have a huge passion in one area but you don't have the experience yet, that's fine. Pivot into another area. A wonderful example, if you do lots of e-learning but you want to get into games, well, a lot of e-learning companies also develop serious games. Like that's the term for it because it's all educational. So it might be a matter of you contact those clients that you've already worked with and said, hey, just letting you know I also do character voices and would love to help you on your next serious game as well. And that's a wonderful way to pivot into that section. Lots of audio production companies don't always specialize in one medium, they do lots. So really look back over your current clients and see if there's a way for you to pivot into another medium. So yeah, don't make your job harder for yourself than you need to be. Really establish those links where you can. Alrighty. Yeah. Thanks so much for coming, everybody. Alrighty, I'm going to let you go now. Have an awesome rest of your morning or night, depending